Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, today we are stepping straight into the shadows to investigate a really dark, profoundly disturbing mystery. We're looking at a sequence of events so terrifying, so literally unsettling, that it permanently shut down two historic religious institutions. No yoke. We're examining the haunting of St. Mary's Sacred Heart in Calcutta. Now look, this isn't just your standard bump-in-the-night ghost story, right? It's a chilling case study in human betrayal, profound grief, and a supernatural vengeance that honestly defies all logical explanation. So get ready, because what we're about to uncover together is going to challenge everything you think you know about that thin line between the holy and the absolute horrific.
Now, normally we'd start with a bit of a roadmap, an agenda, but today we're throwing that out. I want you to experience this investigation exactly as these horrific events unfolded. Think about it. Two prominent churches, total pillars of their community, just completely abandoned and closed off forever. To understand why, we have to look past the stone walls, past the stained glass, and look directly at the people who walked those halls. We really have to peel back the layers of a deeply, deeply guarded secret.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. The Silent New Nun, an Unwilling Devotee.
So, picture this. It's the last Saturday of March, evening prayers at the nun hostel. Mother Superior Agnes, she's the head of the training center, introduces this new arrival to all the other young women. 22-year-old Maria. Now, Mother Agnes publicly hypes her up as God's special child, literally claiming she was born specifically to serve at the feet of the Lord. But Maria, she radiated this heavy, unnatural, deep sadness. Zero eye contact, absolutely no emotion. After the introduction, she just silently walks away to her room. Huge red flag, right? Well, the very next morning during prayer, fellow nun Roma's suspicions escalate into just pure, visceral dread. You know, the defining markers of a demonic presence usually involve these drastic, unnatural changes to the human host, and Roma notices Maria standing at the very back of the hall. She isn't reciting the prayers at all. She's mumbling something else entirely, kind of like she's actively trying to shield herself from the holy words. So Roma sneaks closer to listen, and Maria is speaking in this dual, overlapping voice, and one of those voices was distinctly the deep, gravelly tone of a grown man. Unbelievably creepy.
Section 2. Symptoms of the Demon. The Escalation of Terror.
And this brilliantly illustrates how fast things spiral out of control. By that evening, Roma is just consumed by the mystery of this beautiful, educated, yet profoundly disturbed young woman. So after everyone goes to sleep, she decides to investigate. She creeps up to the window of Maria's room, peeks inside, and what she witnesses in the dead of night is the true beginning of the horror. Maria is sitting in a chair, but her body, it's entirely contorted. Her limbs are twisted and tangled together, neck snapped to the side, literally like a lifeless rubber doll. Suddenly, Maria's head snaps toward the window. Her eyes are sunken into these deep, dark pits. Hair wildly disheveled, and her teeth are completely black like burning coal. Roma just screams in absolute terror and collapses. Mother Agnes and the others rush in. And the moment Agnes enters holding a cross, Maria leaps from the chair, drops to the floor, and starts growling like a wild animal. As Agnes slowly approaches, the cross inexplicably slips from her hand. Maria's pupils turn pitch black. Her fingers snap backward with this sickening crack, and she pounces. In just a flash of pure animalistic violence, Maria bites a massive chunk of flesh right off Mother Agnes's hand.
Section 3. The First Failed Exorcism, Holy Water and Acid Burns.
Okay, so after Maria is finally subdued and locked up, it becomes undeniably clear to the church leadership they are not dealing with a medical issue here. Father Steve is brought in to cleanse Maria, immediately recognizing this as the work of a dark, supernatural entity. He gathers the nuns outside her door to pray continuously while he goes in armed with prayers and holy water. Now, holy water is, by definition, meant for spiritual healing and purity, right? But when Father Steve sprinkles it onto Maria, she shrieks in pure agony. Wherever the water touched her skin, it reacted violently. Massive blisters formed instantly, exactly as if she was being burned by pure acid. Eventually, she collapses, seemingly cleansed. But the cure was a total illusion. Days later, she starts eating with this terrifying voracious speed, shoving food into her mouth like a starved animal. And worse, she starts speaking fluently in multiple unknown languages, languages a girl raised in an orphanage would absolutely never know.
So the situation is completely out of control. Father Steve and Mother Agnes realize they need a specialist. Enter Father Edmund, who arrives on a Friday night to perform a full, formal exorcism. And this wasn't just a simple prayer. Father Edmund initiates a strict, mechanical containment procedure. Step 1, they tie Maria securely to a chair. Step 2, they surround her with a protective circle of holy water. Step 3, light candles across the room to hold back the darkness. And finally, Father Edmund begins to loudly recite the holy incantations. But Maria's eyes just go black again. A sinister smile creeps across her face, and she starts cycling through those multiple languages again, her voice wildly fluctuating between a crying infant and a booming, angry man.
But here's the thing. The containment fails spectacularly. As Father Edmund's prayers grow louder, Maria screams with an unbearable, deafening intensity. In a single moment, every candle in the room violently blows out. Boom. Darkness. Father Edmund watches in absolute horror as the literal ground between him and Maria begins to crack and split open. Maria's body goes completely rigid, but then something impossible happens. Mother Agnes, who is just standing nearby, suddenly collapses, and when she looks up, her own eyes have turned pitch black. The demon isn't just possessing Maria anymore, it has taken over Mother Agnes to force a confession.
And this right here is the pivot point of our explainer. We are moving from a straight-up story of demonic horror right into a tragic mystery investigation. Section 4. A dark, buried secret, the origin of evil.
Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds, because this is where the true horror lies. Through the possessed body of Mother Agnes, the entity screamed out a dark truth that originated exactly 1 year prior. The demon confessed that Maria never actually wanted to be a nun. 1 year ago, Maria was a joyful girl who sang at the city church, and there, a young priest named Father Neil fell in love with her, completely breaking his vows. They entered a secret romance. 4 months later, Maria discovers she's pregnant. Father Neil absolutely panics. To save his reputation, he enlists Mother Agnes and a nurse named Julie. On a stormy night, they give Maria pills to force a premature delivery. At 2 a.m., the baby is born. The nurse lies to Maria, telling her the baby was dead, but in reality, Father Neil and Mother Agnes took that innocent, living child out to the graveyard behind the church, dug a hole, and buried the infant alive to hide their sin. This absolutely forces us to examine the terrifying duality of these characters. On the surface, you've got Father Neil and Mother Agnes maintaining this pristine public facade. They were respected, holy figures guiding their flock, right? But their hidden reality was monstrous. Their utter obsession with protecting their public image and their societal reputation drove them to commit deceit, coordinate a forced medical procedure, and ultimately murder an innocent living child. It's just sickening. When Maria finally learned the truth, her grief was absolute, all-consuming. As she screamed to Father Neil, "What did you do with my child? Tell me the truth." He coldly told her to just stay quiet, knowing nobody would ever believe a young girl over a highly respected priest. Broken, hollowed out by guilt, Maria began visiting the graveyard every single night at midnight. She'd sit in the dirt, screaming and crying out for her murdered baby. And our source material tells us that it was this intense, agonizing grief, combined with calling out to the dead at midnight, that opened a doorway. It essentially invited vengeful spirits into her body, and among those spirits was the soul of her own murdered child, desperately seeking retribution.
Section 5. The Fiery Revenge, the Ultimate Price.
With the truth finally revealed, the narrative totally shifts. The demon is no longer just some random monster. It is an instrument of profoundly justified vengeance. Now, what's really interesting here is that in the midst of the exorcism, as Father Edmund continued throwing holy water, Maria screamed, "Bundakaro," which means stop it. Then, in just a horrifying display of power, she grabbed her own arm and violently snapped the bone backward in the complete opposite direction. Her agonizing scream literally pierced the room. Father Edmund frantically signals for someone to call Father Neil. When Neil finally arrives and sees the absolute chaos, he nervously laughs, terrified but trying to keep his composure. But the demon, it had exactly what it wanted right in front of it. It murmured this chilling phrase, "Ek bap, eka saza," one father, one punishment.
What happens next is a scene of absolute visceral retribution. Maria snaps her head upward. Instantly, the bodies of Mother Agnes and Father Neil are violently yanked off the floor, levitating high into the air. The unlit candles from the floor suddenly shoot upward, sparking to life and instantly igniting the clothes of the priest and the Mother Superior. Father Edmund is just watching helplessly. The holy water slips from his hands, dropping uselessly to the floor. Because Agnes and Neil are suspended so high up, no one can even reach them to put out the flames. The perpetrators of that dark, buried secret literally burned to death mid-air, paying the ultimate price for their sins.
Following the horrific, fiery deaths of Agnes and Neil, the entity finally released its hold. Maria collapsed, barely breathing, but she survived. She was rushed to the hospital and eventually recovered physically, though obviously those mental scars would remain forever. Father Edmund survived too, forever haunted by an exorcism that took 2 human lives right in front of him. In the aftermath, both the City Holy Church and St. Mary's Sacred Heart Church were permanently shut down and abandoned. So as we close out this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought. Looking at all the facts, the horrific symptoms, the terrible betrayals, who was the true evil in this case study? The demonic entity that possessed a grieving mother? Or the respected holy humans whose unspeakable actions drove her to the graveyard in the first place? Thank you so much for joining me for this investigation. Keep asking questions, always look past the facade, and I will see you in the next one.